Andres from AA Sports, the 2026 Daytona 500 is now in the history books, and what a crazy ending it was to NASCAR's biggest race of the year. Congratulations to Tyler Reddick, the driver of the number 45 Toyota for 2311 Racing, which is co-owned by Michael Jordan and current NASCAR driver Denny Hamlin. Tyler Reddick won the first Daytona 500 in the team's history, and it is also the first in his career. What a crazy final 5 laps it was, especially the final lap, which had 2 separate crashes. Credit to NASCAR. When the first crash entering turn 1 happened, the race officials did not throw the yellow caution flag out. They let the remaining drivers who avoided the crash race back to the finish line. There was then, of course, the second crash coming to the finish line, resulting in a heartbreaking ending for Chase Elliott, Zane Smith, my favorite driver, Joey Logano, who won this race in 2015. But crossing the start-finish line, it was Tyler Reddick who came across first while everyone else crashed behind him. As the number 45 of Tyler Reddick wins his first Daytona 500, here are 5 takeaways and things we learned from this year's running of NASCAR's biggest race of the year. Takeaway number 1. Corey Heim is a great prospect within Toyota Racing Development's program in NASCAR, who looks to have a bright future in the Cup Series. He was driving the number 67 Toyota and qualified his way into the race by being one of the 2 fastest non-chartered cars in single car qualifying on Wednesday. In the race, he led 8 laps and was at the front of the pack in the top 10 for most of this race. He had a very good race for it being not just his first Daytona 500, but his first ever super speedway race in a Cup car, while going up against the veterans of the sport. It is a shame that we won't be seeing him compete next week in the Cup Series race in Atlanta, but I do look forward to seeing him compete in the other 11 races he plans to drive in the number 67, starting in April at Kansas Speedway. Takeaway number 2. The Toyota teams really know how to work together in super speedway races and put on a masterclass in the final stage of the race. Throughout the entire third and final stage, it was the 3 Toyotas of Christopher Bell in the number 20, Bubba Wallace in the number 23, and Corey Heim in the number 67 who were leading the pack and methodically controlling the pace of the race. And because these 3 Toyotas, along with a 4th Toyota in the number 35 of Riley Herbst, because they were also able to get organized on the bottom lane, it enabled them to have full control of when they could make the final pit stop as the first group of cars, and also gave them control of when the rest of the field could also make that final important stop, because with the Toyotas controlling the inside lane of the track, most of the rest of the field in the outside lanes were unable to get to pit road like they ideally wanted. This played a major part in putting the Toyota cars in position to win and ultimately resulting in a Toyota winning the race. Moving on to takeaway number 3. Kyle Busch and Bubba Wallace are this generation's Mark Martins. Busch and Bubba have really put their heart and souls into winning this race, but have either crashed out or both come up just short, finishing in second place while trying to win this race. And this year, both drivers had a similar outcome, despite this year and the early stages of the race looking very promising as potentially the year they would finally win NASCAR's Super Bowl. Kyle Busch started on the pole for this year's Daytona 500 and led 19 laps in the race. And Bubba Wallace in the number 23 was the dominant car of the day, leading 39 laps, the most in the race. But in yet another ending where they fall short, Wallace and Busch both get caught up in the wrecks on the last lap. And it really does give me Mark Martin vibes, which is why I say they are like the Mark Martins of this current generation of NASCAR drivers. Mark Martin was known for trying to give it his 110% effort to try and win this race, as winning either a championship or a Daytona 500 was really the only thing missing from a very successful career that saw Mark Martin win 40 races in the Cup Series. And he came so close, just a few feet from it in 2007. Practically had the trophy in his hands, only for Kevin Harvick to beat him in a photo finish at the line and just rip the trophy out of his hands to take it for himself. And that was a race where Mark Martin did everything right, but still ended up as the bridesmaid, as fans would call it. And Busch and Wallace this year in the 500 gave me very similar vibes to Mark Martin. Wallace and Busch, there's a Spanish sports saying, when it comes to teams who play well but still lose, jugó como nunca, pero perdió como siempre. In this case, very similar take. I have a very similar take. Wallace and Busch manejaron como nunca, pero todavía perdieron como siempre. As the Spanish sports saying would go here, the 23 of Bubba Wallace and the 8 of Kyle Busch, they drove like never before in this race, but still ended up losing like they have in the past in this race. And it leaves us with the question we had and were asking when Mark Martin was driving in the Cup Series trying to win this race. Amid coming so close and even finishing second in this race before, will either of these two drivers finally get over that hump and be able to win this race? In my opinion, as long as Bubba Wallace remains with 23XI Racing and is competitive in the number 23 car, he will be a contender for the next several years. So I do like his chances of being able to get over the hump and win this race in the future. As for Kyle Busch, Busch is an aging driver in NASCAR now at 40 years old. This may have been one of his best chances, and we don't know how many more opportunities he will get in this race. Only time will tell, but right now, Wallace and Busch currently sit in the same position Mark Martin once did. Takeaway number 4. And this can be either good or bad. Let me know in the comments what you think. But my 4th takeaway, for better or worse, the Daytona 500 no longer comes down to the best driver with the best handling car, like most other races on the schedule usually unfold. Rather, the Daytona 500 just comes down to who wins the lottery, who just has the luck of the racing gods above on their side. This is something Eric Estep mentioned before. Shout out to him. Great channel that covers NASCAR. And I have mixed feelings about it. I kind of agree to some certain extents. And why do I say this? Well, the reason why I say this and make this my 4th takeaway is because one lap, just one single lap, that is all that race winner Tyler Reddick led in this race. And while many fans will look at that and say, hey, well, that's racing for you. The final lap is the most important, gotta lead it. And while that's true, and it does lead to the occasional surprise upset wins, I'm looking at you, Derek Cope. At the same time, it also goes against the way most races unfold throughout the rest of the season. And it also goes against every idea that fans have of what makes a win for a driver well-deserved and or well-earned. In every other race, when the top contenders separate themselves from everyone else and lead laps and battle it out for the win among themselves, amid them having the best driving performances in the race with the best handling cars, you could say for any one of those 3 or 4 drivers who, whichever one goes on to win the race, that it's well-deserved for either one of them. For example, in Sonoma last year, I was at the race. You can check out the videos on my channel. Last year in Sonoma, SVG dominated the race, leading almost every lap. And nobody debates the idea that that win last year at Sonoma Raceway was well-deserved for the driver from New Zealand. On the other hand, when a driver wins thanks to a late caution that ruins it for another driver who was leading and more dominant in the race, while we still congratulate the winner and are happy for them, we still feel that it was more out of a lucky break than it was by their overall performance. And in a way, it kind of puts a dark cloud that like overshadows that win in a way. I'm noticing that over the last few years, this is becoming more and more of a trend in the Daytona 500. In the last 7 Daytona 500s, including this year's race, 3 of the winners won the race while only leading 1 lap, the final one. And in these last 7 Daytona 500s, 6 of the last 7 drivers who would go on to win led just 10 laps or less in the race. And going back to the logic of, the last lap is the most important, gotta lead it because that's the lap that matters. The last lap is the one that matters. True, but if that's the case, if that's what's becoming more emphasized, it brings up the hot take, that hot question of, then what is the point of doing the full 200 laps when only the last one is the one that truly matters, as the race just becomes a wreckfest and war of attrition? If so, we should just line up all 41 cars 3 wide and just have a green-white checkered shootout, or maybe a 5 or 10 lap shootout, and that's it, the Daytona green-white checkered, or the Daytona 5 or 10 lap shootout. And this is why I say this trend is for either better or worse, because in the Daytona 500s of the past, in the 2010s and in the 2000s and 90s, when the pack racing, specifically in the 2000s and 90s, when the pack racing wasn't as compact like it is today, and while you would still have the draft, the better performing drivers and better handling cars would still create separation. The winner would more often end up being a car and driver that you felt put up a very competitive performance. Dale Jr., for example, led over 50 laps, over a quarter of the race, in both of his Daytona 500 wins in 2004 and 2014, respectively. My favorite driver, Joey Logano, led 31 laps in the 2015 race, but was still up at the front of the pack even when he wasn't leading. Matt Kenseth in 2012 led 50 laps when he won it. Dale Jarrett led 89 laps in the 2000 Daytona 500. And this is why I sometimes find myself having more appreciation for the Daytona 500s of the past than I do the most recent ones in this current decade, because in the last couple of decades, you had your upsets and surprise wins like Trevor Bayne and Austin Dillon, but you still had more of the Daytona 500s, like most other races throughout the seasons, where the better cars would stand out, break away from the rest of the field, and it was one of these cars that would stand out from the rest of the field and perform the best that would go on to win the race. And this is also why I have more appreciation for the racing at Atlanta now and its style of super speedway pack racing, because it does remind you of the 90s and 2000s. They are still in a pack, and the big wreck that would potentially throw a wrench in the race, it's still a possibility, it can still happen, but the better handling cars and drivers, just like super speedway races back then, are, they're able to create separation and stand out from everyone else. I know I'm going into a really long explanation, so I'll stop here so I can move on to my last takeaway. But I think you get the point. While the current and more compact super speedway racing has made the driving very aggressive and the finishes of the Daytona 500 wars of attrition, albeit still very entertaining ones, at the same time, it also makes it to where if it weren't for the stages and points awarded at the end of them, the rest of the race would be almost irrelevant. And if this continues, the underdog story, I fear, will start to lose a trait of what makes it special. To appreciate an underdog story in a Daytona 500, it has to not happen often. That's what makes races with upset results, with these miracle stories, eye candy for fans. And if this trend of the Daytona 500 just coming down to luck and a war of attrition continues, I worry that we will be getting an annual miracle story while trading away well-deserved dominant wins in the big race that we will also remember and feel iconic, where we go, wow, remember when he nearly led half the race and won it? Like, we lose that at the same time. Hence why I say this trend of the Daytona 500 just becoming like the lottery and a game of chance, this trend is going to be either for better or worse. Right now, especially after this year's running of the Great American Race, it does not look like this trend will change anytime soon. So we'll see what happens. But let me know your opinions on on this takeaway in the comments. Do you agree or disagree? Do you feel split about it like I do? Pour your thoughts on it in the comments. I would love to read what you all think. And lastly, takeaway number 5. And that is focusing on a rookie in the field as well, Connor Zilisch. Takeaway number 5. While Connor Zilisch is a bright prospect, don't be surprised if he struggles more than we expect this year. In this first race of the season and his first ever super speedway race in a cup car, he definitely drove like his age. In stage 2, he got loose off turn 4 in the middle lane and got himself caught up in a crash in the tri-oval as the cars reacted to him getting loose and were unable to check up as he got loose. It caused a wreck. Zilisch gets taken out in it as well. Zilisch ended up finishing 33rd in the race and really did drive like his age. You know, don't get me wrong. Do not get me wrong. Connor Zilisch moving up to the Cup Series this year after an incredible 2025 season in the O'Reilly Series is well deserved. However, we have to remember that he is only 19 years old and still has much to learn in his first full-time year in NASCAR's top racing league. With that, while the sky is definitely the limit for Zilisch as one of the best prospects since Jeff Gordon, expect that this year will likely not go as well as last year went for him in the O'Reilly Series. And our expectations for him this year should not be extremely high as he just tries to get used to Cup Series racing and learn as much as he can in these first races. Nevertheless, I wish Connor Zilisch the best. Andreas from AA Sports. There you have it, my takeaways from this year's running of the Great American Race, the Daytona 500. Let me know what you guys thought of the race in the comments below. Did you think it was one of the best Daytona 500s ever? Did you think it was one of the worst Daytona 500s ever? What were your major takeaways from this year's race? I would love to hear that in the comments below. If you enjoy my NASCAR content, feel free to leave a like on this video and subscribe to my channel and check out my other sports content to help support this sports passion project. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and I will see you all in the next video.